This episode is brought to you by Pepsi Wild Cherry. Pepsi Wild Cherry is bursting with delicious cherry flavor and a sweet, crisp taste that gives you more to go wild for. Getting wild may look different these days, but whether it's opting for a solo Friday binge watch or a big night out, everyone can indulge in their wild side with Pepsi Wild Cherry. Also available in Zero Sugar. So grab a Pepsi Wild Cherry and get wild.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Hello there, Duke fans, and welcome to episode number 555 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. It is Wednesday, November 8th, 2023, and in case you missed it, Duke has a big game coming up on Friday night. Duke men's basketball welcomes the Arizona Wildcats to Cameron Indoor Stadium, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2, and we have a special guest here that's going to help us break down this game, someone who knows Arizona basketball way more than Jason and I do. Before we bring him in, I'm Donald Wine. I'm your host. As I mentioned, Jason Evans is with us. Jason, hello.
I'm doing great. By the way, Donald, can I have privilege of asking the first question to our guests?
You sure can. Well, let's introduce the guest before you start just grilling him with questions. Here we have Brian Peterson. Brian Peterson is with Arizona Desert Swarm, which is the SB Nation blog that covers Arizona Wildcats sports, and he's here to help us break down the Wildcats ahead of the big game on Friday night. So, Brian, first off, thank you for coming in and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Go ahead, Jason.
I was going to say, Brian, the first thing I want to know has nothing to do with the game coming up. I want to specifically... Perfect. I'm sorry?
Perfect start.
Yeah, there you go. I want to start just with the notion that Duke and Arizona are playing a home-and-home series because we were super excited about this when it was first announced. Duke, just for a variety of reasons, I think we just don't get many home and homes. We play a lot of teams in like special one-off kind of things at like at the United Center up in New York, at Madison Square Garden and elsewhere. We play all these like high-profile teams in different places, but rarely do we do the home and home kind of situation. Tell me, from an Arizona perspective, coming to Cameron, I mean, my goodness, is this a big deal for you like it is for us?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just in general, it's great for college basketball to see these teams play on each other's courts because there's so much about home court advantage in college basketball. But for Arizona specifically, they have so much trouble getting big name teams to come to Tucson, to McHale Center, that, to be able to get one to come in exchange for going somewhere else is incredible. And Tommy Lloyd has already shown that that's something he wants to do. The first games he added after he took the job was getting a home and home at Tennessee, starting at Tennessee, and finishing up one that was against Illinois. And in addition to Duke, there's one that starts this season with Wisconsin at home. And I'm sure he's going to keep doing more of those. He's got all those high profile neutral site games. Michigan State in Palm Springs, Indianapolis is where they'll play Purdue, playing Alabama in Phoenix, and even playing Florida Atlantic in Vegas. But if he gets the opportunity to play on someone else's court, if they're willing to come back, he's going to do it.
And before we get to the game that is ahead of us on Friday night, I honestly want to look ahead very quickly to next year because Duke will be, as we mentioned, as a home and home, Duke will be going to Tucson next year. Again, we were excited about the fact that we are, hitting the road for a true road game. But what's the buzz been like about Duke coming to Tucson next year? I know it feels like an eternity away, but if people started talking about that game as well?
Oh, certainly. Since Arizona fancies itself as a national program, they look at schools outside of its conference to create, from the fans at least, a rivalry. And Duke has been one that I think the fans have always looked at as a rivalry. dating back to games from NCAA tournament. In fact, 2011, when Sean Miller went on that surprise run, getting to the Elite Eight and beating Duke as the number 1 seed in the Sweet 16, that conjured up a lot of memories of when they would play back in the 80s and 90s when Lute Olson was there. So always glad to have an opportunity to do that. And since Arizona considers itself to be one of the top programs, it wants to go up against those other ones. And all the talk about West Coast bias or a negative bias against the West Coast and favored toward the East Coast. When Arizona gets a chance to play teams from the other side of the country, it's great to be able to show that there is good college basketball beyond the East Coast.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that this matchup is going to be bananas, not just this year, but also next year. I want to get into the game. We've talked about the non-game enough, but let's talk about the game on Friday night. And I want to start with the familiar. And the familiar for Duke fans, at least, is you guys got Caleb Love in the offseason. Of course, he transferred to Arizona from UNC. How has he, and I know you guys have had
Donald,
Donald,
he kind of transferred to Michigan and then
I'm a Michigan fan. We don't talk about that. The direct line of sight is UNC to Arizona. There's no Michigan involved in this, Jason. Don't bring Michigan to the box. But let's talk about Caleb Love. Obviously, he is one of, I think, 3 transfers that you guys had in the offseason. How has he kind of integrated into this lineup? Because again, you guys are looking great, especially considering your first game, you scored 122 points, which is not something you see very often in a college basketball game.
No, it was, I think, tied for 5th most in school history, and the margin of victory was 1 point off the school record. And frankly, they probably could have dropped 130 if they didn't put the walk-ons in with 4 minutes left. But Caleb Love, I didn't think that they were going to get him. I didn't actually think that they would want him because of the reputation he had with a volume shooter and what the tough season he had at North Carolina last year. But when they got him, I had to think that Tommy Lloyd and the coaches realized that they could find a way to fit him in without him having to be the same player he was at Duke. And small sample size, whether it be their international tour to the Middle East in August or the exhibitions or the first opener, he's not jacking up shots all over the place. In fact, I was surprised at how much he goes to the rim and tries to draw fouls and just get layups, which is something Arizona did not have last year. That was the biggest flaw on the team, was the lack of aggressiveness from the guards. And he brings so much of that. And if that's what he does and still takes some threes, but is preferring to get to the rim, he's going to be an incredible fit.
When you think about the rest of the guards that you have, again, if someone who is listening to the show has not seen Arizona, I mean, we've only had one season or one game of sample size, but if they had not seen Arizona play, what can we expect from Arizona's guard situation? And again, talk about maybe the starters or even guys that kind of fill in off the bench.
Yeah, it's essentially a 3-guard lineup with the third one being more of a wing. The point guard is Kylan Boswell, who's a sophomore. He was a kid who reclassified and came in as a 17-year-old and came off the bench last season and showed a lot of promise. And then he had a career high 18 in the first game of this season. He's got tremendous upside and just shows a great balance of looking for the shot, but also finding the open man. Jaden Bradley, who started the exhibitions but came off the bench in the opener, he's an Alabama transfer who was, I believe, a McDonald's All-American that they missed out on coming out of high school, but after 1 year with the Crimson Tide decided to, I guess, go with his second choice. He's kind of, I don't know what role he has yet because he hasn't really done a lot offensively from what I've watched, but he seems like he's somebody that's very involved on the defensive end. And then there's a freshman named KJ Lewis who is fairly underrated, an El Paso guard who could be pretty good given the opportunity. Pella Larson is a wing. This is his 3rd season with the team, transfer from Utah, who was probably their most aggressive of the players who would handle the ball. He's also great at drawing charges and a good rebounder for being a guard. And those are the main guys that are going to be handling the ball and working in the backcourt.
let's get to the big men really quick, because Arizona is big, and it all starts with Umar Ballo. Am I pronouncing that right, by the way?
Ballo, but close enough. Yeah, Umar
Okay.
Ballo.
7-footer, 260 pounds. He's a senior, so he is a grown man. Last year averaged, better than 14 points per game, almost 9 rebounds per game. He's a nice shot blocker. He's a dude who's never shot less than 62% in his career. So he's mostly taking shots at the rim. Tell me a little bit about, what's going on with Arizona up front, because to be honest, from a Duke perspective, feels like we are more guard heavy than we are big man heavy, at least at the moment. And Ballo could be a real problem.
Yeah, Umar, this is actually his fifth year of college and his fifth year working with Tommy Lloyd, because he was a Gonzaga recruit who redshirted his first year and then played very little the second. And then when Tommy Lloyd came from Gonzaga to take the Arizona job, Umar entered the portal, and that was one of his first pickups. And he was a kind of the sixth man who started a little bit that first year and then has started every game last year. And he's not going to be taking shots very far from the rim. He's a very traditional back to the basket, offensive rebound, rim protecting kind of big man, but he does it all very well. He's getting better with his free throw shooting. And his conditioning has gotten so good to where, when he was at Gonzaga, they couldn't play him for more than maybe 2 or 3 minutes at a time. He'd just get winded. Now he can be out there in long stretches. He had a play against Morgan State on Monday where he got a steal and he was able to gather and drop and run the court and dunk it, which he really couldn't have done that 2 years ago, maybe not even last year. So he's shown a lot more athleticism. And that's the thing. Tommy loves athletic big men. Last year, they had both him and Azuolas Tubelis to form probably the most athletic overall front court in the country in terms of how well they could run the court. And Azuolas was tremendous with being able to get the ball on the run and still be able to score. That 4 spot is where we got to see if it can be as productive. Right now, it's Keshad Johnson, who is a transfer from San Diego State. It's kind of funny. 2 of the 3 transfers Arizona got have played in the national championship game in one of the last 2 NCAA tournaments, whereas Arizona goes and gets knocked out in the Sweet 16 and then, lays a huge egg against Princeton. So they picked up these guys with NCAA tournament experience, which is big for a team that doesn't really have a lot of that. But Keshad is going to be one of those like offensive rebound, clean up the glass, dunk the ball, be an enforcer on the defensive end and score when he can. They had more depth in the front court. They actually have 3 7-footers on the roster. 4 7-footers on the roster, but one of them, Dylan Anderson, is redshirting, and that was his choice. Another one, Henry Visar, just had an elbow injury right before the season started, and we don't know when he's going to be coming back. So the main backup is a 7'2" Lithuanian named Motiejus Krivas, who is basically a bigger Azuolas Tubelis. They're actually from, I think, the same hometown in Lithuania, but he's a guy that they think sometimes he's going to be the leading scorer in a game, depending on how much he plays, because he shows so much ease at being able to score at the rim.
Arizona with a Lithuanian 7-foot pipeline. No, I don't like it. I think you guys should get rid of it. But it's funny. I think about Arizona, previous years, and you really play physical, especially, again, you talked earlier about kind of the West Coast bias, but it's more about a lot of people in the East Coast don't get the opportunity to, stay up late and watch a lot of Pac-12 games. But Arizona plays very physical in years past, and they were a team that were, they were very on the ball, like very, on the nose type of defenders. Is that the same style this year that is being employed for Arizona, or is it more of a case where they're kind of adapting to the times and not playing as physical on the ball?
It's not going to be the physical from the sense of trying to muscle their way through people, but it's just using their hands and keeping the ball in front of them and making it so that people don't get the open shot and really just have to force things up and just not lose somebody in that rotation. The defensive numbers last year were among the lowest in recent memory. Previous coach Sean Miller, that was kind of more his bread and butter. He really wanted that strong defensive side, and then the offense would come through transition and whatnot. I think Tommy loves to play fast, but he doesn't want it to be where they're winning 112 to 110 because they're giving up a score every time down the court. They want to be able to play fast, but also make teams work on defense or force something up early, and then they can use their size to be able to get the rebound and go out in transition.
Let me go to the offensive style of play. You talked a little about transition, but I wanted to ask about, is this a team that is, are they putting up a lot of 3-pointers? Look, I saw the game against Morgan State where they had 27 3-point attempts. But just give me a little sense of their offensive style of play. I don't know, that game may be a little bit of an outlier. Anytime you're scoring 120, plus points, it's not necessarily indicative of what's going to happen in a game against another real Power 5 opponent.
Sure. And Tommy has said in the past that he actually much prefers 2-point shots to 3-point shots. But if they're open, you need to take it from the outside. But he just loves the ability to get the ball close and get it inside and the high percentage shots. Arizona, I think, only had in his first 2 years, maybe 1 or 2 games where they've taken more threes than twos. And those usually are not great offensive performances. Since he loves big men and being able to get that ball inside, he wants to go that way. This team isn't as built inside out as the first two. It's much more inside or outside in, but I think he wants the driving rather than the just pull up and take the jump shots. They play fast, but they play fast in a way where they're still passing the ball around. They're going to be top 10 in the country in assists like they have the last 2 years. I think they led the country in assists his first season, and they'll assist on 70 to 80% of their baskets. And most of the ones that they don't are like putbacks or someone being able to break out in transition. And so if the 3-point shot is there, it's there, but it's not going to be the primary shot.
Before we get to a prediction, the one thing that I want to ask you is this. If Arizona wins this ball game on Friday, it'll be because they did what?
Basically just stuck with whatever game plan they put together and through their scouting and just tried to maximize whatever positives they think they can find or exploit, and that they use the depth that they think they have this year. They were a 7, maybe 8-man rotation last season, and it started to show toward the end of the year. They didn't have that ability to, if someone's struggling, that they can pull them and put someone else in. They can go 9 or 10 deep in this one. I'd hope that they're going to try that this early in the season, even though it is such a big game. And if they can get that bench scoring and that depth to be able to remain fresh, combined with just sticking to whatever they feel like they can do, then I think they can win this game. But I don't think they will win this game. And it's kind of going to be hilarious to see Arizona fans overreact to a road loss against a top 2 team the first week of the season. And, we kind of joke around here that Arizona, whatever number of losses they have that during a season, that's how many season-ending losses they had. So it's almost going to be more funny to see how people react to a loss than a win.
So I was actually going to ask you for a prediction on the game, and you're saying that you're thinking Arizona is going to go down. What's going to be the difference on Friday? Why do you believe that?
I just think that in college basketball now, when you have so much turnover on the roster and all that, and I think playing a true road game this early in the season, when you still really don't know what you have, I think it provides a huge opportunity to fail and to see where your failures are. And some of the things that Tommy Lloyd said after the first game is, that if this would be win if we get it, but also if it's a loss and we do things bad, it's going to be a tremendous teaching moment. And they've only lost 1 game in the non-conference under Tommy in the first 2 years, and that was at Tennessee right before Christmas, his first year, and they fell behind huge and then managed to get it close down the stretch. But it was a game that really kind of set the tone for them to be able to dominate the Pac-12. So I don't think he'd be too upset about a loss either.
Well, I know Jason and I certainly hope you're right on Friday night, obviously. But Brian Peterson from the Arizona Desert Swarm, again, thank you so much for joining us, and we appreciate you. And hey, we're going to be doing this again next year, so let's do it again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
All right, we're back, and we once again want to thank Brian Peterson from Arizona Desert Swarm for joining us on the DBR podcast to, again, help break down this game that we have on Friday night from the Arizona side. Now, Jason, first of all, he gave a lot of great information. Your thoughts on what Arizona could bring to the table on Friday night?
Well, I want to start with, I'm so intrigued by a guy that he said, "Oh, we're going to lose," and he's eager to see the fan reaction to that. It's his comment about why they're going to lose, I think, is something that Duke fans, we should really listen to, because this is an Arizona team that there's, look, there's some guys who are back from last year, no question about it, but they are integrating a lot of new transfers, a couple new recruits. It is not a team that is going to be fully formed 5 days into the regular season and playing on the road in Cameron. I'm not saying that Caleb Love or any of these other guys are going to have jitters about that. These guys have, these transfers especially have played big time games and big time situations and such, but just knowing each other and being able to play together the way that, in the kind of cohesion that a team would ordinarily have. The Arizona team that Duke's going to play on Friday is probably not the Arizona team that they will be in January or February. I mean, that's true of every team, but especially of a team that is integrating a lot of new people. And I just thought it was fascinating that he made that point as a way of saying, yeah, I think we're going to lose this ballgame.
Jason, in a way, this Arizona team reminds me of last year's Duke team, and the fact that you have a lot of guys that first of all, you have 4 7-footers, right? They took the tree that we had last year, and they got their own guys who are 7 feet taller. So they have 4 of those guys. They have a lot of guys that are coming in. They have a couple guys that are returning, but some key people who are new to the team in various fashions. And a week into the season, it's probably hard to really break down what it is they do well, because they've only had a couple of opportunities to see them. And same with us. I know we're a team, we're relying a lot on last year's, potential from some of these players that we have returning, coupled with the stars that are freshmen that are coming in. So it's interesting with this game as we switch to kind of focusing, Jason, on what Duke brings to the table for this game, because we heard a lot about what Arizona does. The one thing that Brian didn't point out that I think is going to be a major test for Duke, and I mentioned this on our recap of Dartmouth the other day, is the rebounding. We have not yet demonstrated that we are an excellent rebounding team. Jason, I know, again, it was Morgan State, as I mentioned, they beat them 122-59. They had 8 players in double figure scoring. They had 16 steals, their first 25 turnovers. And the stat that really boggles my mind is they had 22 offensive rebounds, and they had 49 overall. Morgan State, by the way, only had 18 defensive rebounds. So their offensive rebounding rate was 55%. That is something where, that was something that we did last year. We had some games where we're like, oh, we're basically snapping 52% of all rebounds on the floor. And this year so far in the blue-white game, the UNC Pembroke game, and even Dartmouth, we haven't seen, at least right initially, a demonstrative thing that says, hey, this team is going to be a great rebounding team. So I think that is going to be a key point of emphasis in this game, making sure that if Arizona takes a shot and they miss it, that's the only opportunity they get. Because in these battles against, top 10 teams, top 12 teams, you want it where the other team is only getting one chance to score on you. And if they don't get it, you get the ball and you're going the other way. It provides more opportunities for you to score, and those rebounds are going to mean the difference, between, a 2-point game and maybe a 10-point game.
Well, yeah, and it's worth noting, Morgan State is like one of the 10 or 20 worst teams in all of Division One. At least, that's where the preseason rankings are. Still, Arizona beat them by 70 points. I mean, like,
they did their job.
It's an outrageous
right?
score, but I mean, your stats are gonna.
They beat the team that they were supposed to beat, and they did it in the fashion they were supposed to do it in.
Yes, but the stats are just going to be incredibly skewed in a game like that. But you are absolutely correct. I mean, their rebounding numbers do jump off the page. I'm very concerned about what Duke does with the big men, with Ballo, however it is pronounced, who's the starting center, who, like I said, 7-footer, 260 pounds, and then his backup, who's 7'2", 260 pounds, Krivas, the kid from Lithuania. It is going to be a load for Duke taking care of those guys. And I'm going to tell you something. Ryan Young, love Ryan Young. And Ryan Young knows how to battle. But those guys, especially Ballo, are way more athletic than Ryan Young is. And I worry a little bit about Ryan being able to, he's going to be physical with them, but he's going to be able to stay with them with their athleticism and their length. And to me, that's a huge concern for Duke. The other thing I'm looking forward to in this game, look, we heard it from our guest. Arizona wants to play deep, and Arizona plays fast. Last year, Arizona was 13th in the nation in tempo. This is a team that pushed the ball up the floor. And the reason they were 13th in tempo, by the way, was because of their on offense. It wasn't because of their defensive tempo. It was their offensive tempo. They pushed the ball up the floor really fast, and they were playing fast. We've already heard they're going to be playing, 3-4 guards almost at all times surrounding that one giant center in the middle, whoever it may be. So sort of like Duke, this is a team that's going to play deep. This is a team that's going to play fast. They're going to be playing a lot of guards. And I think it's going to be a really, really interesting matchup. I will not be surprised. It's the last time you go, first team to 70 wins. Sometimes first team to 80. This game may be first team to 90. This is a game that could easily be both teams above 90 points.
And that all depends on, again, how hot people may get behind the arc. We have a lot of guys who can shoot the three, and getting great shots, making great decisions with the basketball is going to be key. As Sam said when he was last on the show, back on Sunday, Cameron needs to be lit. L-I-T exclamation point. Need to be lit.
Amen.
Because
yes,
that is going to also be a very big intangible that we have. And again, if we want these home and home games, then we need to show that we want these home and home series, and we need to make sure we take care of business against Arizona. I think the last thing, Jason, that I will focus on is the fact that the rotation that we've seen so far, maybe the Dartmouth game was kind of playing itself into what we could see against Arizona. You mentioned a lot of the big guys who are fit, who are really, really big. And you mentioned that Ryan Young may not have the athleticism to keep up with them. Maybe that's why there was a little bit more of Christian Reeves in that Dartmouth game to give him some confidence, because he is a little bit more athletic. And he, again, he's very active with his arms. He, puts his hands in passing lanes, and he tries to block shots. And I wonder if that is a signal that, hey, maybe Christian Reeves might get his number called a little bit earlier in this game as well. I also wonder with the starting lineup, the biggest question, obviously, is Mark Mitchell going to be ready to go? And I know he was 50-50 for the Dartmouth game. If that Dartmouth game on Monday was Arizona, would he have played? I venture to say he probably would have at least given it a go. And I maybe think that we'll see him on Friday, barring any setbacks in his recovery. But I do think if Mark Mitchell's in this game, that is a big asset for Duke, because our defensive pressure increases by that much. And also, again, it takes the pressure off of the big men, because when it comes to that, some of these, with Mark Mitchell in the game, a lot of these passes that are going to be free flowing into the paint will have a little bit more difficulty.
Yeah, look, and he's the guy who would take on Keishad Johnson, who is a big time transfer for them, and sort of, a not dissimilar player to Mark Mitchell. They're both, sort of the Swiss Army knife kind of guys, do a little bit of everything for you, and are very, very good on the defensive end of the floor. I'm really looking forward to this matchup. The last thing I'll say about it is I'm very interested in seeing, you sort of alluded to this, the rotations for Duke, who gets time. Look, it was really easy, even when the Dartmouth game was kind of close for the first 7 to 10 minutes or so. It's easy if you're John Shire to be working guys in and not be thinking all that much about is this guy right for this situation? I'm going to be very interested in seeing, is Duke nearly as deep as they were in that game? You mentioned Christian Reeves. How much time is, and when is Christian Reeves coming in, if at all? Is Duke going to Sean Stewart at all? Does TJ Power get any minutes? How much time does Jalen Blakes get? I wonder if we will see John Shire shrink things up a bit in what is a very, very big game. And it's entirely possible that we see a Duke team that really is only playing 7 guys for the most part. I wouldn't be entirely shocked at that if Caleb Foster and Ryan Young are really assuming Mark Mitchell plays and starts, are really the only guys coming off the bench. I'm very interested in seeing how that plays out. None of us know. Heck, John Shire may not even know exactly how those rotations are going to play out against a big time opponent.
One last quick thing. Hey, Caleb Love, can you not have a Caleb Love game, please? Like, don't do that stuff that you normally do against Duke and Cameron. Just stop it before you get here. Leave that in Tucson. When you come here, come correct. Play like you did in Chapel Hill, where you were going like 1 for 19 from the field. Do that on Friday night. Then I'd be a very happy bit.
Hold on. Look, remember, Caleb Love hasn't always been great against Duke. Last year when he played us, he was, in Durham, he was not very good at all. He wasn't terrible, but I mean, he only had 12 points in that game. He didn't shoot particularly well. I don't know that, I don't feel like Caleb Love he's always great against Duke. He's had his games, most assuredly, but
it feels like it. It always feels like he's the guy that and I think the X factor is that, of course, he's the one guy on this roster for Arizona that knows what it's like to play in Cameron. He's done it 4 times. So he knows what it's like to be in Cameron and play in front of the crazies. So he's the one that's probably telling them how to embrace that pressure.
And last thing, I'm really interested in knowing and hearing about how the Arizona players react to it. Look, they are used to playing in one of the best arenas in the country, the McHale Center. Arizona has a great crowd. I don't know, top of my head, I don't think there's a better crowd in the Pac-12, Pac-10, Pac-2. I don't think there's a better crowd in that conference than the McHale Center in Arizona. And I don't know that these guys have played any place that's anything like Cameron. How many arenas are like Cameron? But I'm gonna be very interested in hearing from them about what it's like to play on the receiving end of what they sometimes get a little taste of when they are playing at home in the McHale Center. And then the last thing I'll mention about them is this Arizona team has a really impressive schedule this year. We got a little taste of it when we were doing the preview there, and we were talking a little bit about it. They're going to play Wisconsin later on. They play Purdue. They play Alabama. It's going to be very interesting, I think, from a Duke standpoint. Oh, and they play Michigan State as well. To sort of track, once we see the result of this game, it's going to be interesting for us to track Arizona as they play other top tier teams, and we can sort of begin to measure ourselves, that transitive property kind of thing, measure this Duke team against some of the other teams that Arizona plays. So this is a super important game.
The best way to measure a team against another team is to see them play on the court, which we will get to do when Duke hosts Arizona on Friday night. Again, 7 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN, The Deuce. I think it's ESPN2.
It is.
So, again, check your local listings for that. Make sure you tune in. Those of you who are in Cameron, give them hell for myself and for Jason Evans and for everybody else who can't make it. But this is episode 555 of the DBR podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And now it is time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.